2026, I think, is going to be a big year for all of us. The challenges in the world are pushing us to remember who we are right now. There's a spark that lives within each of us that cannot be measured at this time through technology and instruments. It's our connection to a part of ourselves that doesn't live inside the human body, that reminds us of the deep truth of who we are, what our potential is in this world, and our ability to navigate the world in a healthy way into the new world that's emerging. You know, the old world is unsustainable. We cannot go back to a world that no longer exists. We're here now, and we can only move forward. And it begins with us remembering who we are and allowing that spark of divinity from within us to be expressed. That spark has always been with you, and through the ages, there have been efforts to repress and deny that spark. Our job is to peel back the layers that have denied our divinity. Because when you take away the programming and you take away the lies, all that's left is what's true. Your imagination, creativity, empathy, sympathy, compassion, forgiveness, love, healing, those are all expressions of this divine spark. That's what 2026 is going to be about for all of us.
There is a feeling many of us can't ignore anymore. Something in the world is shifting, and it's not just headlines or social media noise. It's deeper, older, and it's touching every part of life at the same time. People sense that the structures we grew up trusting, political, economic, cultural, even spiritual, are cracking. The old world is struggling to hold itself together, and what looks like chaos is actually something else. The collapse of systems that have been running on borrowed time. For centuries, humanity has been pushed into a way of living that rewards separation, control, and fear. The masculine principle, the energy of dominance, became the foundation of our world order. And the feminine principle, the energy of intuition, wisdom, compassion, and inner knowing, was buried, dismissed, ridiculed, or punished. The age of Aquarius marks the return of the feminine current, the rise of Sophia, the reawakening of the part of us that cannot be controlled. And when something suppressed for thousands of years begins to rise again, the structures built to contain it begin to fall apart. That's what we are feeling now. At the core of all this is something simple: remembering who we are, not learning something new, but remembering what has always been there. Some forces in the world want us to forget that. They want us to feel powerless, so that we look outside ourselves for solutions. Technology, institutions, belief systems, anything that keeps us dependent. The world tells us the noise is coming from out there, yet the real shift is happening inside us. Something powerful in the human being begins to stir, something we once knew but lost sight of. Mystics tried to explain this long ago. Ignorance isn't just lack of knowledge. It's a force that keeps us asleep. It fills our minds with thoughts that aren't ours, emotions that aren't rooted in us, desires that never belonged to us. And it convinces us that the cage is freedom, and the distraction is truth. But that spell is breaking as our awareness rises. A deeper intelligence is resurfacing in the human species. The same intelligence the ancient Gnostics protected. The same wisdom modern systems are terrified of. Even science is beginning to recognize what ancient teachings pointed to all along. We carry abilities within us that go far beyond our usual expectations. Resilience, intuition, healing, memory, clarity, creativity. These capacities belong to our biology and to the natural expression of consciousness itself. And when we reconnect with that inner intelligence, the Sophia within, fear loses its power. And without fear or hate, we become far less vulnerable to agendas that try to shape our lives for us. Control loses its grip, and the old world can no longer define who we are. This is the real revolution. Not a political one, but a spiritual one. A remembering of our own nature, a return of the feminine current the world tried to erase. And in that remembering, the collapse of the old order stops being something to fear and becomes the beginning of something new. Every day, we hear that we are free because we can think, choose, and decide. But here is the paradox. The version of freedom we were taught to believe in was built inside the very system that keeps us asleep. For generations, the outer world has dictated what we should fear, what we should trust, what we should worship, and even what we should consider real. We grew up inside a structure where thinking was allowed as long as it followed the accepted pattern, where choice was permitted as long as it didn't question the foundation beneath it. And now that foundation is cracking. What you are seeing around the world isn't random chaos. It's the collapse of an order that could only survive as long as people never looked inward. An order rooted in fear, obedience, and authority. An order that taught us to distrust our own inner power, while depending on institutions that were slowly losing their influence. This is why the collapse feels so unsettling. The world that gave us our identity, our rules, our morals, and our meaning is dissolving. And for the first time in centuries, people are beginning to sense that the real world, the inner world, was ignored, suppressed, and forgotten. Ancient mystics understood this long before modern society did. They warned that humanity wasn't just misled. It was trained to mistake illusion for truth. They described forces, structures of thought, that wrap the mind in habitual patterns, convincing us that limitation is natural and that the cage we live in is simply how the world works. But here is the breakthrough that changes everything. Beneath that conditioning, every human carries something the old order could never replicate. A signal, a spark of inner intelligence, a capacity to perceive directly, beyond dogma, beyond fear, beyond the stories we were raised inside. And this is why the old world order is collapsing. Not because of politics, not because of economics, but because human consciousness is beginning to sense what has always been hidden underneath the noise. That the real source of authority is internal, not external. This is a revolution not of politics or ideology, but of awareness. Remembering who we are is the essence of gnosis, direct knowing. This knowing was once central to human life, and it was deliberately removed from common teachings in the 4th century. The ancient Gnostics called themselves knowers. Not believers, not followers, knowers. For them, truth wasn't something handed down by priests or written into doctrines. It wasn't memorized. It wasn't inherited. It rose from within. Gnosis begins as a quiet certainty. It isn't faith, because faith is needed when you are unsure. Gnosis appears before belief, before language, before explanation. It comes as an undeniable feeling in the core of your being. And once it awakens, no book and no teacher can replace it. No institution can grant it. Every person must discover it directly within themselves. The Gnostics lived with a simple understanding. Every structure built by society, whether family expectations, religious rules, cultural norms, or political systems, pulls human beings away from their true nature. These systems demand obedience, conformity, and fear. They promise safety, but never deliver it. They define life as a chain of duties, obligations, and boundaries. And in the middle of all that noise, the human spirit forgets itself. Gnosticism rejected this entire framework. Its teachings said that true selfhood cannot emerge by becoming what society wants, nor by repeating its rituals, nor by living according to its instructions. The purpose of life does not sit in ceremonies, traditions, or social expectations. It lives in our connection to the cosmos, to nature, to the intelligence that moves through the universe and through us. For the Gnostics, The human being is a microcosm of the greater rhythms of the cosmos, the rising and setting of the sun, the seasons, the constellations. All of it reflects an inner process. The solar plexus as the inner sun, the ascent of energy toward the pineal gland as the return of light, the right hemisphere of the brain as the eastern sky. These ancient symbols weren't poetry. They describe the transformation that occurs when a person turns inward and lets the inner fire rise. Because of this understanding, the Gnostics became enemies of the world's authorities. They threatened every system built on obedience and fear. Their writings were burned, their communities erased, their ideas hunted down, not because they were heretical, but because they were free. A free human being cannot be controlled. A free human being does not serve systems that feed on fear. And their most dangerous idea was simple. Human life does not fulfill its purpose inside the structures society builds. True selfhood emerges only when a person follows the intelligence of the cosmos within. To the rulers of their time, this was unacceptable. If people learned to stand on their own inner knowing, the entire system would collapse. They called themselves strangers on earth, pilgrims of eternity, because they never fully fit into a world built on fear, division, and control. Anyone who has ever felt out of place, anyone who has ever sensed that life is more than the structures handed down to us, has already touched the edge of the same knowing. Gnosis is the return to what we have always been. The spiritual evolution of humanity is deeply connected to the re-emergence of the feminine principle, long suppressed in our cultural and religious structures. Patriarchal systems held this energy down, distancing humanity from its natural wisdom, holistic perception, and inner guidance. The early Gnostics called this inner force Sophia, the feminine principle of God, waiting to be recognized and activated within each person. It is the inner wisdom that reveals instead of controls, that connects instead of divides, that guides from within instead of ruling from above. This energy lives in our ability to perceive the universe directly, to engage with life through intuition, creativity, and understanding. Societies that have marginalized women or degraded feminine qualities have simultaneously blocked the spirit itself, because Sophia is the bridge between the human and the divine. She waits in the inner temple, the right hemisphere of the brain, and awakens through stillness, meditation, and inward attention. It reflects that reality has two movements. One force builds structure, the other restores balance. For a long time, one of these movements was allowed to dominate. The old world order was built almost entirely on the outward-facing current. Hierarchy, conquest, rigid logic, external authority, and the belief that value comes from control. It was a deliberate system, and it survived by suppressing the inner current, intuition, empathy, creativity, emotional intelligence, insight, and the quiet sense that truth is something we feel before we articulate. These qualities have been undervalued for millennia. When that inner current is silenced, people lose their natural guidance system. They become easier to direct, easier to frighten, easier to shape. Entire civilizations were built on this imbalance. But cycles end, even the ones that last thousands of years. What we are seeing now, the breakdown of institutions, the exposure of deception, the rise of inner questioning, are signs of the return of that lost current. The world is entering a period where external power structures weaken and internal awareness strengthens. This is why so many people feel pulled toward introspection, toward meaning, toward self-understanding, even if they can't explain why. At the heart of Sophia's awakening is a deeper connection to nature, a return to inner knowing rather than external impositions, and an awareness of life's rhythms beyond human-made structures. This feels like a realignment with what has always been within us. Movements that prioritize cooperation, understanding, and presence reflect this shift. It's why the old ways of thinking suddenly feel heavy and outdated. It's why younger generations reject systems that don't align with authenticity. The feminine current, Sophia's current, is resurfacing because the human mind is becoming capable of perceiving it again. And this return changes everything. When the suppressed qualities rise, the human being becomes harder to manipulate. Old narratives lose their authority. People begin to sense that they carry a deeper intelligence that wasn't taught by culture, religion, or institutions. It was always there. It was simply dimmed. The rising feminine current restores balance. It reconnects what was split. It brings back the parts of us that were exiled for centuries. And once that happens, the structures built on imbalance cannot stand. This is the psychology of civilizations. Sophia reminds humanity that true power arises from alignment, the integration of mind, heart, and spirit, and that reconnecting with this energy can guide both each of us and communities toward greater clarity and harmony. Modern science is beginning to show that humans are capable of far more than previously believed. We are on the edge of remembering abilities that go beyond what we call normal. The human mind and body possess extraordinary self-regulating powers. The body can intentionally regulate stress responses, strengthen immunity intentionally, and activate dormant processes linked to longevity. The mind can rewire neural pathways, sharpen clarity, and expand perception. The pineal gland, once considered mystical, is now recognized for its role in regulating cycles, perception, and even neurochemical processes. These capacities are natural, inherent in all of us, and do not rely on external devices. They are real, biological abilities. From enhancing memory and resilience, to igniting the body's innate healing and adaptive mechanisms. Yet right at the moment we begin to rediscover our inner capacities, we are being encouraged to hand them away, to technology, to artificial systems, to anything that keeps us dependent. There is a push to replace us, our creativity, our intuition, our thinking, even our bodies, with artificial systems. Chips in the brain, chemicals in the bloodstream, replacements for human imagination. But our natural biology often exceeds what machines can do. The real technology is within, our consciousness, intelligence, and the power of the human being itself. The Gnostics knew these things intuitively. They saw the body as a living instrument of the cosmos, tuned to higher frequencies when the mind becomes quiet and receptive. We are also the generation that carries the task of ending transgenerational hurt. Trauma passed through families, through cultures, through history. It's in our DNA, literally. And that brings us to one of the most fascinating discoveries of modern science. Human DNA is not just biological matter. It is a three-dimensional fractal antenna, tuned to multiple fields of information. It connects us to memories, to knowledge, to what some call the Akashic record. And when we change our perception of ourselves, the shape of the DNA actually changes. The antenna retunes. It begins receiving a different kind of information. So when we think differently, when we remember who we are, we literally reshape the antenna within us, opening channels that enhance memory, intuition, clarity, and even biological self-regulation. And through that, we start living differently, healing differently, and relating to the world in a new way. Human imagination, creativity, and intuition are forms of innate technology that no external device can replicate. They are natural expressions of our internal potential. When fear, distraction, external pressure, and imposed limitations are set aside, these abilities emerge spontaneously. They are the same forces that allow healing, innovation, and profound empathy. Technology is often presented as a replacement for these abilities, yet human biology has capacities that external systems cannot replicate. Our innate potential exceeds the capabilities of machines when it is consciously accessed. The key lies in direct experience and personal knowing, not belief, not instruction, but awakening the intelligence embedded within. This rediscovery is a process, and it begins with understanding and working with the body and mind as instruments of awareness. Practices that engage the pineal gland, the right hemisphere of the brain, and the solar plexus, as described in ancient and modern teachings, are not mystical rituals. They are methods for activating the inner mechanisms that enable the full spectrum of human potential. Our potential is not something to be learned from outside. It is something to be remembered and activated from within. The changes unfolding in the world are not random. They reflect a deeper tension between two directions of evolution. One direction expands human awareness, strengthens inner intelligence, and supports the natural capacities built into us. The other direction leans toward external control, dependence on technology, and a growing disconnect from our own perceptions. We live in a time where attention has become a resource. Every major institution, political, economic, technological, and cultural, is competing for it. They shape information, design environments, and influence emotional states, all to guide the human mind in predictable ways. This influence works through repetition, distraction, and constant stimulation that keeps awareness turned outward. When awareness stays external, people lose sensitivity to intuition, instinct, and subtle perception. They start relying on systems that promise solutions, while slowly replacing their own natural abilities. This is visible in the push toward artificial enhancement, digital memory, algorithmic decision-making, and technologies that claim to improve what is already built into the human system. Each step creates convenience, yet it also quietly shifts authority away from the individual. But the way forward in these transformative times isn't through fighting. The old idea of winning versus losing no longer applies. What we are doing now is something different. We triumph by becoming the best version of ourselves. We triumph by loving without fear, by healing, by creating, by remembering, by refusing to shrink. This is how we move forward without getting pulled into the conflict. This is the moment we are in, a moment when old systems collapse, distractions grow louder, and the remembering strengthens. And as we reconnect with what's already inside us, we begin to access a way of being that was always meant for us, one that is healthier, clearer, and truly human. Humanity has been conditioned for millennia to seek guidance, security, and validation from external authorities, governments, religions, institutions, even social norms. These systems teach dependence, keeping attention focused outward while ignoring the inner source of wisdom. The Gnostics called this the deception of the world. Structures that appear necessary for survival are actually barriers to recognizing our own capabilities. True authority, the power to navigate life, perceive, heal, and create, originates within. It is anchored in the conscious awareness of the self, in the ability to listen to the inner voice and respond with clarity and intention. This inner authority aligns perception with reality, recognizes patterns, and enables action from a place of centered awareness. Societal collapse, global tensions, and technological pressures are tests, revealing how much we rely on external crutches. The spiritual revolution emerges when people reclaim the power that has always been theirs and begin to operate from direct knowing instead of inherited assumptions. The more we cultivate this internal authority, the less we are manipulated by fear, distraction, or dogma. Decisions no longer come from what others demand or systems dictate. They come from an intimate understanding of the self and the universe, from the spark of awareness that has survived centuries of suppression. I hope this message is helpful on your path. Thank you for watching until the end. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so please share them in the comments, and see you soon.